I basically live for this kind of cross-pollination.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of saved me from going insane, as much of life seems chaotic and unfair, you know?
Right.
And so in this way, I feel like art has saved me. And by art, I mean all these different kinds of expression and how sometimes they overlap and speak to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love the idea that you listen to a Joe Henry record and thought like, wow, who's this guy, or Ornette Coleman, you know? And I'm trying to think if I ever had a moment like that recording-wise, where I was staring at a record jacket and somebody appeared on it and I needed to know now more about that. I think of it more in terms of dedications, like people would dedicate a song to somebody, then I'd want to know who that person is or was, you know? And I was guilty of over-dedicating in all my early work. I have a record, my first record under my own name is called Angelica, and every song but one is dedicated to somebody on the record. And I went on and on with this pattern for quite a long time, to the point of being mildly ridiculed by a bandmate at one point, you know. And I'm sort of, I guess, over it, but actually, in a way, dedicating a song to someone can help me finish the song. Because sometimes I get an idea, and if I think it relates to somebody or something, I'll be able to conceptualize it thoroughly and really imagine it with a certain totality, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And also, I really like people who I like. So so I like writing pieces that are dedicated to people who have had a big effect on my life. And I don't want to overdo it, though.
That's, you know, it's interesting, the cross-pollination that you're talking. I remember, like, when I was really getting into Tom Waits, it also happened to coincide with when I was reading a lot of Raymond Carver, and I was finding all of these like similarities between that and then Bukowski also, and then filmically I was, you know, then like, okay, he's worked with Jim Jarmusch, so I started watching Jim Jarmusch films, and then Robert Altman stuff, and there's just and then there was the connection where Altman made a film based on Raymond Carver stories that had Tom Waits in it. So it was like,
which is absolutely true.
Yeah.
It's
great. It's but for, you know, and I suppose that it's interesting. I'm somebody, I'm in my mid to late 30s now, I guess, 36. And so I was basically born, you know, when I was growing up was at a time when I guess CDs were the last big thing to hit. And then pretty shortly after that, it was all starting to move digitally. But my family had a huge record collection, and, you know, I got a lot of stuff from that, and that's kind of where the love for it came from. And even now, I don't consider an album a part of my collection unless I have something physically. It's there's something
that's so hard living in New York to be me, because I have all this stuff and records and CDs. I still buy CDs because CDs are quite often the only way you'll hear esoteric or underground improvisers.
Yeah,
and the reason for that, I believe, is because improvisers tend to be quite prolix, meaning that the records can be quite long. Mm-hmm. But I think also crucially, many improvisers travel a lot, and you can't travel with vinyl.
Right.
But beyond that, vinyl's very limited in terms of how long your program it can be.
Yeah.
And it's extremely expensive. It's unwieldy in the extreme. And also I have a lot of criticism about the current obsession with vinyl when there is no inadequate quality control, and that it's a polyvinyl, ultra-polluting substance, and nobody's taking any heed, seemingly, of that. And but of course, I love my damn records, and I love record covers, and I love the scale of that, and so I have all this stuff, and But I'm with you because when you have the object, you also have what we were talking about earlier. You have the damn credits.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you might have some really cool artwork. And, I think very seriously about, on my records, what they're going to look like. Mm-hmm. And as do most of the people I know. And there are plenty of records that I'm on where I have no input whatsoever, and I don't want to have input. You know, these things just come out. I have a lot of records in my, I guess, discography or whatever you want to call it, that I call accidental records. They're basically records that got recorded. They're recordings of live performances of improvised music that somebody thinks is cool and should be put out, and then they figure out a way to put it out, and I say, okay, put it out. A couple of those coming out this year. One with Larry Oakes and Gerald Cleaver, and one with Tom McDonough and Michael Wimberly. And, these things happen, but even those guys, I think, care about what they look like. But in my case, it's another connect the dots possibility. It's not only just trying to create a vibe and put something together that works in some way, like coming up with an album title or something, but also possibly a way for someone to really love what they're seeing and want to know more about the artist, you know? And it's a little less apt to happen when you're looking at a compact disc because they're diminutive scale.
Right.
But still it's important, I think. And compact discs are easy to travel with and cheap to make. And so I think that, and also they are easy to make without defects. So improvisers are still going to make them, and they're still going to make maybe limited editions of them or with cool handmade covers or something, so people don't just think they're deadbeat plastic slabs, Right. And I think that's important. It's important to remember that artists need to be able to move around, and they need to be able to disseminate their work. And it's nice to have souvenirs, of artists that you like. And I can't travel with vinyl,
Yeah.
And it's hard to get quality pressings these days, and you can't return vinyl like you used to be able to. If you had a defective record, you brought it back to the record store and they gave you another one, and then the record store returned the record to the one-stop distributor, and they returned it to the label, and the label melted it down and made their cheaper records out of recycled vinyl. And we're not even doing that now. Now you have these really expensive records, and you're stuck with this thing after you buy it. And I'm a little too old to get excited about vinyl you can't return if the quality's not absolutely top notch. And there's so many ways vinyl can go wrong. And it's just a very fussy, delicate format. And it's great when it's great, but man.
I'm kind of, I have a lot of trepidation about buying brand new albums on vinyl. Like if I know the artist cares about it, like the Wilco vinyl releases, there's a lot of quality control in that, but I usually I'll pick up old stuff. And there's something about, I know that, there are people who don't care about the quality of it, that or that kind of that sound, but I put a brand new album on the other day. I'm not going to name the artist, but I put a brand new release on. And I'm like, this sounds just like, because there are times when, I'm in the car a lot, so I'll buy CDs for the car.
Right.
And I bought, it was an artist that I really, my love for their catalog goes deep. So I bought the record and the CD. And so I listened to the CD first because that's what I got to first. And then I listened to the record and I'm like, I think the CD might actually sound a little bit better. But then I had gone to this record store called the In Groove, which is a great place if you're out traveling around. It's like 44th Street and Indian School. And around there. Anyway, the 40th Street and Thomas. I picked up a couple of old Graham Parker albums, And I put that on, and I got, it was in really good condition. It had been cleaned up really nicely, but I put the needle down, and there's still just a little bit of that pop and the hiss in it. And
well, people love that now because they think it's vinyl. It's ticks and pops are cool. But I think it's important to point out that mastering, of course, is a huge aspect of a good sounding record. And I guess there are younger guys now who are learning from the old guys who are left around who can teach them how to properly master vinyl. But beyond that, if you're talking about Graham Parsons, you're talking about a record that was recorded on tape. So you're listening in a purely analog format, and your new record was very likely recorded digitally, and it's which can be absolutely fine from my perspective, especially because the sampling rate just keeps getting higher and higher. But this sort of precious idea about it's going to sound better on vinyl when you're listening to digitally recorded masters, I find potentially a little bit delusional.
Sure. Yeah.
But then there's this whole aspect of what cartridge does your turntable have,
right,
and how does that affect every cartridge that you select colors the sound of what you're listening to.
Well, even your speakers and your receiver and all of that stuff. So it's
this crazy thing. But boy, do I love those album covers.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if they're like gatefold things and you pull it out and it's.
And also on to the pollutant aspect of it, I just want to say, and I sound like I'm proselytizing, and that's because I am. My friend David Breskin, the producer of Lovers, and he's just a multifaceted, kind of very concerned but interesting guy on so many levels. And he suggested when we were going to do this double vinyl on Lovers that we find out how to purchase carbon offset credits because of the nastiness of not just the vinyl but the whole thing.
The manufacturing process.
There'd been no studies done except in the compact disc era of the impact environmentally of these little plastic slabs in that case. And so we had to just estimate, and we're hoping that it inspired a study. But I just think it's important that people realize that not just vinyl, but certainly compact discs and always-on technology and shipping have a carbon imprint. So we thought we could maybe – well, it's David's idea, and I loved it. So we thought we could start a trend of people buying carbon offset credits. In our case, it's carbon.org that we selected, but there are more organizations than that. They seem to be really sound to us. And it hasn't been a trend at all. And that's why I'm even mentioning it.
Well, that's something that I've paid attention to. I remember there are particularly I had noticed on Crowded House albums, when they reunited and did a couple of them, there would be a note in the back of the liner notes saying that the album was carbon neutral, or that or they had made. I think they'd also made a point in their tour program of saying that the tour was carbon neutral as well. That they had like offset the.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, but I haven't seen it proliferating too much, and maybe I haven't been checking it out closely enough, but. Strangely, no one has ever asked me about this when they're talking about my records. Like, hey, I noticed that, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I just figure that no one is doing anything. So that's why I don't often like to get on my soapbox, but I'm kind of on my soapbox about this. I don't want to get all pissy about vinyl, which I think is really a pretty intrinsically, at this point, North American fixation.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing this in my travels in Europe or in Japan. I haven't been in Australia in a long time. I have a feeling they really like their vinyl, but I could be wrong. It seems like a pretty American and possibly Canadian fixation at this point. So I hope it kind of stays that way, because if I have to start trying to take vinyl to Europe, I'm going to be
geez.
so screwed.
Yeah.
It's so expensive, and I can't travel with it. So you have to send it ahead, and it costs a fortune. It's so heavy, and it's also has to keep away from heat and blah blah blah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially when you
I'm going
get
to be